the perfect snack.
CEO Stewart Parnell starts with peanuts and makes millions by cutting corners and exploiting workers.
Run like a plantation.
The filth breeds one of the biggest food poisoning outbreaks in U.S. history.
But at the other side of the world, this little nut has become a nightmare for thousands of women. The women's hands are badly damaged.
The indigenous people depend on the forests for their livelihood.
There's not much to harvest off the West Bank's olive trees this year. There's been no rain, and Israel diverts underground water to illegal settlements, making it hard for Palestinian farmers to compensate.
Indigenous forests and lands all over the world became attractive stomping grounds for investors.
Hey guys, it's Lavender here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm back with another anti-capitalism activism deep dive video. Today I'm doing the pure evil files of the oil, nut, and vegan milk industry food files. A deep dive into this, and yeah, we're going to get into some true crime cases. But before we get started, these are my other YouTube videos on my YouTube channel that are related to this topic if you'd like to check them out. So let's get started into this YouTube video. Women in India pay the price for nut demand as vegetarian, flexitarian, and vegan diets increase in the UK and in Western countries such as the United States, whether for health, environmental reasons, or animal activism welfare rights reasons. Shoppers are said to be hovering up nuts, eating around 17,000 tons in 2016 alone, a huge 35% increase compared to 2012. In April 2018, a Compare the Markets survey found that the number of vegans in the UK had risen to a whopping 3.5 million. The Vegan Society reports a much lower figure of around 600,000, which is far less significant, but it still represents a four-fold rise in 4 years. As well as a protein-rich snack. Many dairy-free vegan cheeses loved by vegans are typically made using cashews, as well as creamy sauces used in pasta dishes, and also the nut and nut milk market industry, such as cashew milk, is being driven by partially rise in lactose intolerance. Also because most of the world cannot drink dairy, and the dairy industry as a whole is a complete scam because, again, most of the world is lactose intolerant, and dairy animals, like dairy cows, are treated like a commodity, and when they are no longer productive or profitable, they are culled and slaughtered. In India, the cashew growing season is from March to May. Most farmers, especially small-scale ones, do not make large amount of profits and face increasingly competition. India grows approximately 700,000 tons of cashews. More than 60% of the cashews consumed globally are processed in India. Some 500,000 people work in India's cashew nut industry. Nearly all are women, who are paid as little as £2 a day for the labor with no contracts, no guaranteed of a steady income, and no pension or holiday pay. Journalist Emily Clark visited a cashew nut processor in southern India where she shuttles reportedly painful injuries caused by the corrosive liquid acids that lie between the two layers of the hard shell on a cashew nut. Many of the women are not given gloves, and those who are given gloves choose not to wear them as it slows down their work, and they are paid by volume. Even inhaling the dust covering the shell irritates the throat, and workers involved in this industry in the roasting process complain of tight breathing and chest pain. One nut sheller, Gandhi, 30, told the newspaper she's covered in scars from her work shelling out the cashews, but just makes 200 rupees a day. Today, when we go home and wash, we will see the boils on our skin. It takes about a week for them to heal, but as the old ones heal, new boils keep popping up and coming, said. There was another victim of capitalism known as Suyenta, who works in a government-run factory, has been de-shelling nuts for 39 years. She said her back hurts from the work she does, and she has severe joint pain, especially in her shoulders, as do most of her colleagues and co-workers. She also has arthritis and diabetes. Cashews are a luxury product served domestically at celebrations such as Eid and Diwali. Some factory workers say they are checked routinely to ensure they are not smuggling the nutritious nut. Many of the nuts produced in India are sold to supermarkets in the EU, often with the value added through roasting and salting, but a 2007 Action Aid report highlighted the pressure from UK retailers to drive prices down. The Anti-Poverty Agency argued that too many of the costs and risk of trading cashews were transferred down to those least able to withstand them, and revealed a rise in unofficial processing units where margins are smaller and hazards are higher. Now on to the peanut industry and the true crime case involving peanuts. Peanuts have a history linked to the slave trade and to colonization on the African continent. Catless Pig, who shipped tainted peanuts, gets 28 years in prison after 9 people, victims of capitalism, died of salmonella poisoning. Stewart Parnell, a former peanut CEO, convicted for his role in a nationwide outbreak of salmonella in 2008 and 2009 that killed 9 people. Federal officials had recommended that he should have received a life sentence, the harshest punishment ever for a food-related crime. Stewart, who for decades ran the Virginia-based Peanut Corporation of America, was found guilty on more than 70 criminal charges, including knowingly shipping tainted food across state lines, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and wire fraud. His company once billed itself as the processor of the world's finest peanut products, with remarkable food safety standards and regulations and records, but in reality its own internal tests turned up salmonella contamination half a dozen times in 2007 and 2008, according to investigators. He approved shipments despite warnings. Bird droppings are found in the factory settings, along with the court documents also revealing that he approved shipments despite containers that are practically covered in dust and rat droppings. The hidden costs of vegan almond milk. Exploited and disrespected, bees are dying by the billions. Almonds blended and strained in the subsequent quantities to satisfy the collective thirst for nut milk have traveled a great distance to become into a coffee shop staple. Native to the Tian Shan Mountains of Central Asia, California's Central Valley produces more than 3/4 of the world's almond supply, grown in mega farms wholly resilient on honeybees. For pollination, it is the insects that now must do the traveling. As with more than 1/3 of our food species, almonds require pollinator help. And with the blooms of lush and white blooming of millions of trees simultaneously, local pollinators simply can't keep it up. Packed into boxes, loaded onto trucks, and transported to a vast artificial forest, California's $14 billion almond industry depends on bees for hire, which are dying at unprecedented rates. Due to capitalism-caused climate change crisis, and since bees don't do too well in too cold or too hot climates, 50 million bees, 40% of America's honeybees colonies, didn't survive last winter, according to a nationwide survey. Used with a heavier hand on almond orchards than any other Californian crop, researchers have found that capitalism-caused climate change crisis and pesticides such as glyphosate, an active ingredient in Roundup weed killer, are the leading causes of colony collapse and death. We have been gaslit and seduced by the $32 billion per year chemical, fertilizer, herbicide, and pesticide and big pharma industry, who spends millions of dollars each year convincing us that we need to all use these poisonous toxins. According to Nate Donnelly, a senior scientist for the Center of Biological Diversity, sending bees to pollinate the California almond industry is like sending bees to war. Many don't come back or make it back. Chopped from palm trees in tropical paradises and shipped directly to expensive aisles of health food shops, coconuts are catnip to the lifestyle of health bloggers. How exploitation is in an industry. Around 60% of the 3.5 million coconut farmers in the Philippines are living in poverty, one less than $1 a day. Northern and southern pig-tailed monkeys are considered globally threatened, with decreasing populations. And International Union for Conservation of Nature just released reclassified southern pig-tailed monkeys as endangered. What can that possibly have to do with groceries? A lot, actually. When it comes to coconut milk, you can use to put your fruit and veggie smoothies. Two disturbing investigations by PETA Asia has revealed that pig-tailed monkeys in Thailand are being forced to climb trees to pick coconuts that are used in making coconut milk and other coconut products. To obtain these monkeys, many coconut farmers capture juveniles either through baiting or by shooting their mother. These traumatized youngsters are either then confined to small barren cages or kept chained with rigid small collars around their necks. Members of the coconut industry openly discuss buying wild-caught baby monkeys. Through domination and physical abuse of these animals, these terrified monkeys learn to obey their trainers and are told and sold to coconut pickers who force them to spend long periods of time climbing tall trees and twisting off the heavily coconuts, up to 1,000 a day. It is estimated that several thousand pygmy-tailed monkeys are being forced to harvest coconuts in the southern Thailand alone. Although monkeys typically harvest fewer coconuts per day than humans, they are widely exploited, in part because harvesting coconuts can be dangerous. But rather than making the transition to monkey-free harvesting methods, such as planting shorter trees whose coconuts are easier to reach, the Thai coconut industry continues to put monkeys in danger and to profit off their labor and the fruits of their labor. The connection between coconut products and threatened monkeys is similar to the connection between palm oil and endangered orangutans in Burma. These great apes are left homeless and starving when their forest canopies are cut down to make room for the palm oil plantation industries. Primates, including orangutans and pig-tailed monkeys, are considered gardeners of the forest. They play a crucial role in seed disposal up to 75% of plants in tropical regions. Indigenous villagers in West Papua, Indonesia, aka the people of the West Papua Indigenous Genocide, have for years resisted the arrival of the palm oil industry into their lands and territories, yet still saw the ancestral forest signed away by the government, the fascist Indonesian government, their fascist regime, police state, for an oil palm concession. A victim of capitalism, Yance, his family and ancestors are part of the Maui indigenous group who are spread across forests and towns. When he was an official in a neighboring district, he witnessed the damage an oil palm plantation can bring. With cleared land and leaching silt into our rivers and pesticides infecting the air and water supply, that plantation has been linked to the Fangnano family, which was ranked among Indonesia's largest deforesters in the last few years. For more than a decade, Mao members have opposed oil palm plantations in favor of biodiversity of rivers and forests. The coconut's reputation also as a health food, however, is very controversial and is riddled with false advertising, lawsuits, and misappropriation of scientific research, things that recently came to a head in the U.S. when the American Heart Association issued a report that warned consumers off coconut oil because of its absurdly high saturated fat content, higher at 82%, it pointed out, than the amount in beef drippings, which is 50%, or butter, which is at 63%. This has wiped the wellness industry into a defensive lather, and ensuing tussle between the science and believers has inevitably become referred to by some media outlets as Coconut Gate. No one is denying that coconut oil contains more saturated fat than butter and lard. Where the coconut content has gained leverage is in the murky, emerging landscape of good fats and bad fats. So butter has an overall worse profile than coconut oil on this important predictor of coronary heart disease. Crucially, though, he does still not encourage the use of coconut oil. Although it might be preferable to butter, there is evidence that total saturated fat, regardless of which saturated fatty acid is involved, is associated with adverse health effects and outcomes, heart disease being the main culprit, but there's also some evidence in relation to diabetes. In 2023, Starbucks released its latest coffee drink, the Orletto, made with a generous spoonful of extra virgin olive oil. Unfortunately, the drink has reportedly given some people stomach issues and stomach problems thanks to the combination of caffeine, a drug stimulant, and olive oil, a relaxant, having a laxative-like effect. Sicily produces about 10% of Italy's olive oil and is home to hundreds of presses. It is also the original home of the Mafia, and they're still active there to this very day, including in a migrant camp near the town of Cambasso di Mazzia. According to Info Migrants, this dangerous and unsanitary site is nestled among Sicily's olive groves, and police are afraid to set foot there. Hundreds of migrants arrive there every year, often without proper documentation, working for black market gang masters. Frequently coming from Africa, these people compare their living conditions and working conditions to a form of slavery. Living areas are squalid, and they are made to work even in sweltering hot heat for wages that are only a fraction of the legal minimum wage. Palinga reportedly is home to similar migrant camps. Migrant farm workers face similarly inhumane conditions in Spain, the world's largest olive oil producer. Working excessive hours in unsafe working conditions, migrant workers are severely underpaid. Their wages may be refused, their passports may be confiscated, and some face sexual abuse and harassment. Workers who attempt to speak out by joining unions or going on strike are promptly and unfairly fired, making many afraid to speak up and to do so. Morocco currently holds a much larger share of the olive oil market, but this comes with a whole different problem. Pre the African report, Morocco is severely affected by water insecurity, a growing problem globally. The olive trees can require a lot of water to grow. Export crops in Morocco have been described as requiring often unreasonable amounts of groundwater use, prompting some reforms to try to curb the water waste by growing different crops instead. Olive trees are quite resistant to drought, but more water is needed when growing the trees for their fruit. More water means not only are more olives, but better quality olives too. The driest months of the year are understandably when olives require the most irrigation, and according to the trade journal, a single tree can require 8 liters of water a day. Irrigation is particularly important for the younger olive trees in large industrial olive groves where exposed soil means more water is lost by evaporation, so that more water is needed overall. With irrigation, a tree can start producing fruit in just 5 or 6 years, while trees left alone can take up to 15 years to start producing olives. This means, for multiple reasons, olive growers are incentivized to use more water for their trees. They are often farmed in areas that are more arid, and poor soil management can lead to the loss of topsoil. As a result, some olive-producing areas are at risk of desertification. Another issue is water pollution caused by runoff from olive farms, closely linked to soil erosion. The chemical fertilizer and pesticides used in olive farms can pollute surface water, and in some cases this can, affect reservoirs of water. Drinking water has sometimes been found to contain high levels of nitrates from fertilizers. Olives are an essential crop in Palestine. The olive oil industry there makes up around 15 to 19% of the Palestinian agricultural industry, meaning it is a vital source of income for those people in those areas. Around 57% of cultivated Palestinian land used to grow olives. What's more is the trees themselves carry deep cultural significance among the Palestinian people. This led to trees and their growers being targets of violence by colonizer, fascist police state Israel settlers. further impoverishing Palestinians living in the West Bank region. The violence intensified during the harvest season, with extremists also stealing olive oil in their raids. About 40% of new trees planted by Palestinians in 2020 were destroyed by settlers of the Israeli state. Olive oil is separated into a few different grades. The lowest grade isn't actually fit for human consumption. Without processing, it is not typically used in foods. The problem lies in the fact that in the U.S., olive oil has no national quality standard, and the FDA offers little specific guidelines on the matter despite calls for better regulation. The result is it's surprisingly easy for fraudulent olive oil to make its way onto grocery store shelves, and even the genuine stuff may have been produced through uncomfortable, shady means. Like many others, this industry hides some dark secrets. By far the most damaging olive oil fraud happened in 1981, as Reuters reports. A batch of oil sold to the public as olive oil was actually canola oil. Even worse, this oil was intended for industrial use purposes and had been denatured with 2% alaline, a severely toxic and potentially carcinogenic chemical and material. It had such harmful effects it left 300 people dead and many others permanently disabled.